Hello and welcome to episode 10 of MMO Weekly, presented as always by MetsmerizedOnline.com. I'm your host, Sal Manzo, joined this week by friend of the show and MMO associate editor, Patrick Lynn. Mike's on vacation this week, actually get some R&R, so there's a round of applause for Mike. Take a little time there. Yes, very good. But Patrick, thanks a lot for joining the show. And as we sit here, the Mets have their first three-game losing streak. According to Twitter, the season's over and the Mets won't make the playoffs, but they still have the best record in the National League. But ran into a bit of a buzzsaw there with the Astros and that, the two games, the 4-game set, the home and home. And then obviously won the series before that against Miami. But I just kind of want to get your thoughts overall here with, the last couple of games, if the sky's really falling.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you kind of look upward, the sky might be falling, but if you move a couple feet to the left, it's not. The Mets just totally got manhandled by Houston over the 4 games that they played over the last, week or so. And we hadn't seen that this year. Every time, like if the Mets do get manhandled in a single game, they typically bounce back and perform better the next game. And I think that happened both times in the Houston series, but just this time they weren't able to win either of those second games, partly because of Yordan Alvarez. And, before the first series with him, he got hit on the hand and then he just hit like 5 homers against him. Like it didn't affect him whatsoever. But yeah, it was just 2 blowouts to start each series. And then they were more competitive in the second game. Obviously, we're recording this on Thursday. So yesterday, Taijuan Walker pitched a gem, but they couldn't do anything against Justin Verlander. So it's obviously tough to see because with Atlanta playing well and every time like the Mets like lose a game or now lose 3 games in a row for the very first time this year, halfway through the season, it doesn't feel right. Like I think people are just, it's the same old Mets or something. But like if you made it this far without having a 3-game losing streak, you're still doing something right. And like you mentioned, they still have the best record in the National League. And Atlanta's just slowly crept back. And the Mets, again, just in terms of controlling your own fate, still have 12, 13, 14 games left against Atlanta. So if that's your mindset, then, you can very easily just win the division just by going, 9-5 against them the rest of the way. And the Mets are playing 17 games now in the next 17 days. All of them are against sub 500 teams. It's like Chicago, Texas, Cincinnati. There might be one other team thrown in there, but then the Braves, they have a couple games against the Braves too, in Atlanta. So again, we can look at the big picture. The Mets had a positive record in the month of June, even with Scherzer down the whole time, even with only getting like a start and a half from Tyler McGill, Carlos Carrasco not pitching well. They still came out positive on the other side. And it took a 14-game winning streak from the Braves to even make this a division again. But going back to the Mets, mostly just from this series, like against Houston and the loss against Miami, they just didn't hit with runners in scoring position. That was their big problem. And when you're hitting over 300 with runners in scoring position or whatever it was, hitting extremely well, one of the best marks in the league for the entire year, and then you don't do that for 3 straight days and it ends up in 3 straight losses. Like you can kind of see where that stuff is happening. Because again, David Peterson pitched very well last Sunday. Taijuan Walker pitched very well on Wednesday and kept him in the games. And really just one of the 3 losses was one where you're like, okay, yeah, it doesn't happen. But the Mets get a couple hits in either game, then they probably win both of them or at least one of them.
Yeah, no. And as far as what you're saying with the Braves, everyone seems to kind of act like the sky's falling because like the Braves have, been such a, a hot streak the last couple of weeks and everything else. But I think it's important to remember that, yes, obviously you wanted to win the division. That's always what you want to do. And that's what the good teams always want to do. But there are 6 teams that make to the playoffs in each league now. So, listen, Atlanta's a really good team and everybody knew that they were going to get hot. I don't think just because they're creeping up now doesn't mean the Mets are going to, lose the division, be done with it or something like that. I do expect this summer it's going to be back and forth. But, I think if somehow the Mets, wind up, they lose that division lead and Atlanta does take it, there's 3 wild card spots. 3 wild card spots now, and it's not a 1-game playoff. You're in the wild card series. It's the best of 3 now. It's not the worst thing in the world. And if you think about it, is the fact that if you get deGrom and Scherzer back, and you have those guys for the playoffs, it's not the worst deal in the world. It may be an extra start for those guys, like if you don't win the division, as opposed to having to play in the in the wild card round. But if you get your horses back, it doesn't matter wild card, division winner, wild card, you're still going to be able to beat anybody and still be considered a contender. And I think at this point, I think like you said, Bassett has pitched well for the most part. It's been up and down, but he's had a good last couple of starts. I think we're also starting to see uh his bugaboo is that home run ball. Obviously, even on Saturday, he had, a good start, gave up the 2 bombs. That kind of seems to be where he struggles at points, but has been decent overall the last couple of weeks, has bounced back. Walker's been awesome. He had an awesome first half last year, and it kind of fizzled out, but I think everybody's hoping that was able to him take the next step. Never pitched that many innings before, and now this year, you expect the guy to pitch 200 innings and pitch well, right? In the second half, he seems like he's taking the next step. Enjoys being here, enjoys kind of that atmosphere. You see him on Twitter after the starts, giving love to the fans and stuff like that, so you could tell he enjoys it. And Carrasco, I wonder if he's fully healthy. I know he had kind of the hamstring thing a couple weeks ago, whatever, and he's been pitching through it. He just doesn't seem like kind of the same pitcher. I don't know if velocity may be a little bit down or command. But I think at this point, even with the success that the Mets have had, and I'm not saying, they had the best record in the National League, but it seems like if the Mets are going to be really taken, seriously considered as, World Series contender, you need deGrom or Scherzer. You need one of those 2 big horses at the top. And you kind of mentioned it before. It's, probably a completely different series. If you have one of those 2 dudes, lined up the stars as opposed to what, the Mets had, especially like the last day. But yeah, it seems like the pitching has held on as long enough as they could, and it's kind of starting to fray a little bit. Which when the team scores runs, you can do that. But like you mentioned, they've gone cold the last couple of days, and it shows. You know what I mean? When they've been kind of slugging their way through games the last month or so, the pitching's been okay, but the offense has been kind of carrying them there. And a few games they ran into a good team with some good pitching. Obviously, Justin Verlander himself. I'll get to that in a second. Just the fact that this dude has come back and dominate like he does is crazy at his age now. But it happens. It's baseball. Like you said, for the Mets to have their first 3-game losing streak, start at this point in the year at almost July, take a step back and say this is a damn good baseball team, for that to happen to. And the Braves just gotten really hot. They've played teams that aren't good. You just mentioned the Mets are, going to have their next 17 games, 17 days till the All-Star break. And besides the Braves, they're going to play teams that are all under 500. The Braves have had a softer schedule during this kind of hot streak, which I don't know if it's gone, noticed or not. They play predominantly teams that are under 500. So it'll be nice now. Hopefully the Mets can kind of maybe also pad themselves a little bit now that those, kind of more lesser teams will be coming into the fray here. But, listen, I don't think the sky's fallen. I think at the end of the day, you look at like ahead a little bit where they're going to be at the trade deadline. And I think it's pitching, whether that's in the back end of the bullpen or another quality starter. I think, we've seen this year, I don't know if the lockout had a lot to do with it, whatever, pitchers kind of getting hurt or whatever else, but more than ever this year, the more pitching you can have, especially with a team that generally scores a lot of runs. Yeah. You're going to, stay in the ball game. That seems like, it's going to be their main priority. I don't know if you feel a little different, but that kind of seems like what it's going to be come August 2nd or whatever it is.
Yeah. Obviously, like when you lose 3 games in a row or when you get manhandled by the Astros, 4 times in, 8 days or whatever it is, it clearly shows flaws in your system. And I think we've known again with the bullpen, like they've been able to patch it together, but they miss Trevor May, and they miss a couple guys who had been pitching pretty well for them, or someone like Ottavino who had, I think, 16 straight scoreless appearances, and then he's the one who gives up the game-winning home run on Sunday. So it's just kind of and I liked his attitude afterward. He's like, yeah, I hate losing the game for the team, but like it's like one game. Like everyone might focus on that when he just came off again like 16 straight scoreless appearances or whatever, or 16 straight scoreless innings or whatever it was. But yeah, so you while you miss all that sort of stuff, again, it does show some certain flaws. I think, this lineup recently has been exposed for it being a little bit more thin than we thought it was. That partly comes from Eduardo Escobar not playing well. It comes from them largely getting nothing from the designated hitter position. Or maybe I should say not getting anything, but maybe not getting above average performances from the DH position, which we thought would happen with JD Davis and Dominic Smith. Dom is now back with the team. But yeah, so it's like when that happens, and then obviously from the catcher position, you're still not getting too much. Your top 6, 7, maybe even 8 really starts to look like a top 5 or 6. And that's, again, you maybe start getting some holes in the lineup at the end of the month or at the end of the at the lineup, and you can't just keep cycling through batters
Right.
like the Mets
Right.
had, because that's been their MO this year is just to is to keep the lineup moving. But yeah, so clear. I definitely think they need another bat, even if it's someone they can plug in a designated hitter. I
Right.
still think they should go to the trade market first for that. The Josh Bells of the world, the Ty Francis of the world, the Trey Mancinis of the world, rather than into their minor league system with a Mark Vientos or a Francisco Alvarez.
Right.
But again, if worse comes to absolute worse, it's not bad, I guess, to have those fail safes in
Right.
the minor league system. You don't know if they're going to perform well,
Right.
as opposed to guys who you could trade for, where you're like, oh, I know these guys
Right.
can play well.
It's true. I wonder how much the Mets would be willing to give up more so for like you mentioned the Ty France, who's kind of been like on fire last couple of years. Like, I don't know if the
Mhm.
Mets have, not that they don't have enough, but like, would they be willing to give up from that core, especially from the last couple of years? They've kind of been depleted in the farm system. They're trying to build that back up. I just don't know if I see them looking for more of like that name brand hitter, so to speak, to try, to give away too much. Just because, like you said, me and Mike talked about it last time on the show. Like, I don't think you're going to see Alvarez anytime soon. If you do, I think it'll be in September, and it'll be in limited roles of success to get his feet wet. But I think someone like Mark Vientos at this point, bring him up. Bring him up, DH him. I know he's been hot the last few weeks. I know he didn't have a great start to his minor league season, but he's gotten it together the last month or so. But I think at this point, if you can do something like, at least for now, because if you want to evaluate, you bring that guy up, for whatever it is, another month or whatever, see what you got. If he does well, that's great. And then if not, then maybe you can kind of assess what you got. You can go out further. I just I would be more apt to, if I was gonna not sell the farm, but if you're gonna have to give up a piece or whatever to get back, I would do it more for, if it's a more of a front, another frontline starter, or a back end reliever, someone that can kind of impact you there. As far as like the lineup goes, I agree, and I think everyone knows Escobar's been lost. He had a great first month of the year, and that's been it. I know Guillorme's been great, whenever he's kind of played. At this point, would you want to start Guillorme every day at third? Over, I mean, I know you're paying Escobar, was it $10 million a year or whatever, but at least to
Yeah.
just maybe get him right. You know what I mean? And that's a guy also, it's not the worst thing to have a veteran like that off the bench. It may spark him a little bit. He's also a guy that, like, it probably won't like derail his confidence or like, his clubhouse presence. He wants to help the team win. So I'm just I was thinking about that the other day, the way, I mean, it was yesterday, Guillorme had 12 putouts in the game. He was all over the place, and he's hitting, and he's hitting more than Escobar has. So I just wonder at what point do they start saying, Guillorme, you're going to take, you're taking the ball there at third, or, the bat at third every day. And, Eddie, you're going to be coming more off the bench here. And, when you get yourself right, we'll get you back in there, but you got to ride the hot hand.
Yeah, and it was still so bizarre to me. You remember, what was it, maybe a week and a half ago, where they just said, "Oh, like Escobar's out," like
Right. Right.
because of a non-work related medical issue.
Right.
And yeah, and there were obviously some rumors floating around, which we won't touch on here, but just like he was back like the next day.
Yeah.
And it's like when you're in kind of a bit of a rut, and then it seems like you have like a somewhat scary medical issue that people are being a little hush hush about, maybe for
Right.
even good reason.
Right.
But and then yeah, and it's not like directly since then. It's like he's performed worse or something. He's been hot and cold all year.
Right.
But I on the radio yesterday, I think he's in now like a 4 for 46 rut. Like that's tough, and it corresponds a little bit with clearly when he had some level of a medical issue. Like
Right.
it's okay for these guys to like take time off to get better.
Be human.
Yeah, to be a human. Just like, I mean, you think about Jeff McNeil. He was out for 5 games, a total of like 7 or 8 days because he had a tight hamstring. And I'm like, can you put him on the desert? They keep playing men down. Same thing happened. Starling Marte was out for 4 or 5 days. I'm like, there's a 10-day injured list for a reason.
True.
And not saying that they should have done that with Escobar, not saying like they need to find like a fake injury for somebody,
Right.
If a Carlos Carrasco or whatever it is, when it's like they're not performing well. But like, you can let these guys recover. And for whatever reason, like with the offensive players, at least, the Mets just have totally avoided that. Like you remember even Trevor May at the beginning of the year, they were just like, he had like a little biceps tendonitis. He'll have a couple of days off. He came back for 1 or 2 more starts. And then it's like, oh, it turns out he needs to be out 2 months now.
Right.
You know, like you can utilize that injured list. And I think the Mets need to be a little bit more liberal with that. And mainly because, again, like you have guys you can plug into play right now, you know, like that might get by proxy somehow like Luis Guillorme more consistent at bats, which then maybe Dom's the first guy off the bench and all this other stuff. Like they had to demote Plummer because Plummer was he was in maybe over 20, over 25 or something, but like he was getting like 4 at bats a week, 5 at bats a week, you know? So yeah, I just think they need to be doing that. I don't know. So we'll see. I mean, it would make sense to have Guillorme, you know, start at third base for a little bit. You know, it's amazing that he's kind of been this consistent. You know, I think people are like, see, this is the Guillorme that it's always been, but no, I think this is maybe a more fully formed Guillorme.
Yes.
You know, and maybe a little bit more of a mature Guillorme, the fact that he's been here now 4 or 5 years or whatever it is. And now he's playing pretty well and you have a good reason to play him in this like little niche role of kind of a utility, basically Escobar's role.
Right.
I wouldn't mind that, but again, I think it runs a little bit it runs like one layer deeper than just like, oh, let's switch these guys out, you know? I think it just speaks more to like some guys might need a little bit of time off.
Right.
You know what I mean? So I don't know. We'll see. I go back to I wouldn't mind trading them for another bat. Like last year, it would make no sense to me if they had the philosophy last year of trading someone like Pete Crow Armstrong for Javi Baez and Trevor Williams, who seems like it's the Trevor Williams trade now more than it is the Javi Baez trade. But they did that when like the sky might legitimately have been falling. Because Jacob deGrom was out, you know, and they thought he was coming back, but I think they really knew that he might be out until the playoffs. And they didn't address starting pitching then. So it wouldn't make as much sense to me if you kind of then started prospect hugging when you have the best record in the NL, and you have a legit chance to go to the World Series, as opposed to last year when, you know, you kind of could see the writing on the wall even around the trade deadline, if not, because I think Lindor was out around that time too.
I think like first or second game out of the All-Star break, he pulled the oblique or whatever, and he was out.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like you could kind of see the writing on the wall then, but so I don't think someone like Trey Mancini will not cost them Brett Beatty. You know, maybe some other team will be willing to do that. But there are bats out there. You look at what Atlanta did last year. They traded for Jock Peterson. They gave away an expiring contract and Pablo Sandoval for Eddie Rosario. And then they traded for Jorge Soler. And I think they traded for Adam Duvall a little bit earlier in the season at some point too. You know, so it's just like, and what did they give away? They gave away mid-level prospects, and that's the kind of stuff that the Mets need. The Braves clearly went 4 for 4 on those, which was just insane, and clearly what propelled them to the World Series. But even grabbing 1 or 2 of those guys, you know, a month ago when you start thinking about what the Mets need, they need something like 2015. They need an Addison Reed out of the bullpen, and they need something like a Juan Uribe, Kelly Johnson sort of bench player that, you know, can really, again, that if one injury happens, it doesn't totally drop you off. Because that's kind of seemed like what has happened when McNeil's out and Escobar's struggling. Like the lineup isn't all that strong outside of the top 4 or 5. And if we want to, we can get into Lindor kind of struggling a lot this month outside of the Miami series too. But so I don't know. It's again, clearly like the Mets have work to do. It's not we don't want to sit here and be like, they'll turn it around. Everything will be fine. But when you take one step back and you see, they just didn't hit with runners in scoring position over the last couple of days when that's what they've been doing for 2.5 to 3 months. You see why maybe they lost a couple of games and why it might have felt even more frustrating than usual. And then you take another step back though, and you're like, all right, what do they really need in the trade market and all that stuff? It really gives you some time to analyze that. So.
Yeah. And as far as Lindor goes, he has been great this month, like you said, you know, but he's nails with runners in scoring position. He seems to really, at least this year,
Yeah.
Kind of shorten his approach up, shorten his swing up, just try and drive the runner in. He's still doing that pretty well, so I'll give him that. And the defense always plays. He had kind of
Oh,
a
yeah.
rough couple weeks kind of start the season, but man, that doesn't slump.
Yeah.
You see that platinum patch on his glove, you know why it's there.
Yeah,
And it's a lot
absolutely.
of fun to see, even with McNeil at second, but when him and Guillaume are turning double plays up the middle, that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, absolutely. But with regards to Lindor, because he had those. His mom came into town. He
Yep.
had those
Yep.
couple home runs against
Yep.
Miami, in New York. But since he had about an 860 OPS
Yep.
in April, dropped about 100 points in May, dropped about another 100 points in June.
Okay.
And that's with those couple home runs.
Right.
And largely speaking, his expected stats have stayed pretty consistent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
His fly ball rates, ground ball rates, like you try to dig into it and you're trying to like, what's going on here? Like why is he dropping off a little bit? Maybe it's a little bit of just returning to the average. The primary thing I could find is he's just walking a lot less.
Yeah.
He's making more contact, but like in April, April early into May, he was walking 12, 13% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And now that's under 5%. And obviously, like, you don't only look for that OPS number, but clearly that relates to you're seeing pitches a little bit better.
Right.
I mean, he still has Pete batting behind him, and Pete
Right.
is just as threatening as he was back in April and May.
Yep.
So it's not even like he's chasing a lot more, but like he's making more contact, but that contact is not translating to,
Got it.
To hits. Yeah.
Yep.
But you're right. He's still performing pretty decent when there's a guy, on third and less than one out. He's still knocking him in, which again is just a total change up from last year.
Well, yeah.
He's creeping up to his RBI total from last year, like by the All-Star break.
Right.
So that would be pretty encouraging. But yeah, so ultimately, I think another battle due. But the pitching has largely been starting pitching at least, especially with big guns out, been pretty good.
Yeah, no, and then we can get into Diaz coming into the 8th yesterday, which I liked the move, but not pitching the 9th, which I didn't love. I know Drew Smith was in there, and I think the collision between Pena and Alvarez, it seems as though that delay kind of screwed up kind of their plan, so to speak. It seemed like they wanted Diaz to go out for the 9th, but that kind of put a wrench in that. It is what it is. I'm on Buck a lot with this bullpen management. I'm very vocal about that all year. In that instance, I can't go too nuts because, like I said, I think if you don't have that collision, it's a normal inning. I think he does go back out there for the 9th.
Yeah, and it's like, and he had 2 outs against maybe the worst hitter in the league.
Yes. Yep.
Have you played like fantasy basketball and you have categories? You have like 9, 10 categories that you have. And then you like punt a category and you're just like, I'm punt. Like I'll grab all the guys with turnovers.
Yep.
Because that might mean more assists. That mean more steals, like all that stuff. That's what the Astros are doing with the catcher position. They're saying we are punting offensive catcher stats. They're historically bad on offense, but both of the catchers they have, Jason Castro and Martin Maldonado, are great defensive catchers, but they're totally punting it. And this is one of those scenarios where it's just like you punt it, but you still get the game-winning 2-run home run. The guy's batting under 100 over the whole year. His OPS is like 350, which like that doesn't compute in my brain how it can be that low and you can still start. But again, that's the choice the Astros have made. There have been stories written about how this is a conscious decision about them not caring about their offensive catcher stats.
Right.
And so it's like I don't even hate the Drew Smith against Jason Cash. It's
no, I hear you.
It's kind of one of those things,
Right before that, I had a friend of mine saying, with Pena and Alvarez being out, that the Astros lineup, is light now. Hopefully, the Mets can take advantage. And like 3 pitches later, the bomb.
Yeah. Well, that's like that was like in Miami too. Miami, it's like you're kind of like this great amount of hope because of Luis Guillorme play on Sunday, where he kind of one of the best defensive plays this year, and then like a pitch or two later, another catcher takes out Avino deep, and that's just how it goes. And again, it feels more intense because it comes in the first 3-game losing streak. They're not getting runners in scoring position. If this turns into something more of like a 5-6 game losing streak, I think it gets a little bit more serious. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see. Carrasco, we can go back and talk about Carrasco and Peterson. Peterson has been awesome
Absolutely.
recently. Him and Diaz, obviously, I think Diaz's slider is maybe a better slider, but their whiff percentages on the slider are almost exactly the same.
Wow.
Like when Peterson's slider is on, he's a pretty good starter.
Yeah.
Because he's getting a lot of swings and misses on it.
Right. Right.
He's still allowing a lot of base runners.
Right.
But those base runners are coming in the form of singles and doubles and not home runs. Last year, he gave up 11 home runs in 66 innings.
Right.
This year, 4 home runs in 52 innings. So even when he's allowing a lot of base runners, he's letting the Lindor, Guillorme, McNeil, whoever's on the infield turn double plays, help him get out of innings. That's been very helpful for him this year. I'm sure if we looked up, I don't know, is there a stat that's like GIDP per 9 or something like that? Like Peterson would be up there because he is getting a lot of those to get him out of innings. A little bit how like Stroman did last year. Marcus Stroman gave up a lot of base runners last year, but the defense behind him played. The defense behind him, helped him out. And then Carrasco, I guess we could talk about like maybe Houston's just not the lineup for him to face. The first start, you could chalk that up to he had a tight back. Like they pulled him after, what was it, an inning and 2/3?
Two and a third or something. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. But his velocity was down. All that. Yesterday, it was back up. He seemed healthier again. Some of it, he had a little bit softer contact too. But again, Yordan Alvarez, I hope he's okay in the sense that he's an amazing hitter. And, I hope he's not out for a long period after that collision that he had. But that man is insane, dude. That man is insane.
I was
like
just
part of it too is just like, like one guy can carry a team. And, Kyle Tucker has been awesome for the Astros. But when you have someone like Yordan Alvarez, who's like homering every other game against Carrasco specifically, he went 3 for 3, a walk, 2 home runs, 5 RBIs.
That's pretty
good. Then that doesn't include Carrasco getting pulled after that start, after yesterday or on Tuesday, and Shreve coming in, giving up a home run to Yordan Alvarez. So again, part of it too is just like you run into someone like Yordan Alvarez, that's happened to the Mets against Kyle Schwarber. They run into Kyle Schwarber when he's hitting 10,000 home runs against him, especially against Taijuan Walker. Some guys just have people's numbers.
It's true.
And someone like Carrasco's best pitch is his changeup. He threw it a lot yesterday. But Yordan Alvarez is like the best hitter against changeups. So it's like if you can't throw your best pitch against him and you're just throwing him like fastballs and sliders, like I don't know. Sometimes it's just a bad combo. So
and
we try to look at these things in 7 different ways to be like, what's going on here,
But as far as Alvarez goes, we as Met fans, we see him on highlights, right? You watch Quick Pitch, you see stuff like that. They talk about him, but to watch him, now it's just 4 games. Wow. He is a mountain of a man. There are no holes in that swing. It's gap to gap. It's line to line. I don't know if I've seen anyone as a left-handed hitter be able to hit the ball with power the other way, like so easily. Like it just flies off his bat. It's wild. But I guess to put a stamp on that, obviously he just got that nice extension from the Astros, 6 years, 117 million, something like that. When do the Mets, particularly Steve Cohen and company, go up to Pete and say, "Hey, Pete, we got a check here. Yordan Alvarez, similar money. We don't want you to go anywhere. We want to lock you the hell up." When do you think the Mets, and again, I know half their roster's free agents at the end of this year. They're going to have a lot of guys to re-sign. DeGrom's going to opt out. Nimmo's a free agent. Diaz a free agent. Half the team. I understand all that. But
Walker will probably opt out. And
does he have an opt out after this year? I'll write back to you. Literally half the roster. Great.
Yes.
So I guess with all that being said, obviously, I know there's no salary cap and Cohen's got a $1 gajillion. I understand all that. But obviously, you got to bring guys back. But like Pete's obviously coming into form as like an MVP candidate this year with driving in runners, walking a lot more. Obviously, the power's there. He's the man. He's built for New York, I think, which is the biggest thing. He likes this stage a lot and likes that pressure and likes being under these big lights. So I just kind of wonder now, like, when they're going to come up to him and say, "Listen, big man, like we we don't want you going anywhere. We want you being a Met for
Yeah.
a long time. Here's the check. Sign it. I wonder
Yeah.
if like something like what Alvarez got would be a number. I think it might be too low. I thought what Alvarez got was a little too low for himself anyway. But it's a lot of money. So I know he's
Yeah.
giving me $100 million. I can't say that, but I wonder at what point that the Mets really, and I feel like I've said this, in past about Nimmo and things like that, guys like that. But it's just that at some point you got to try and lock these, you want to try and lock these guys up, before, you look like Aaron Judge, right? Who's gotten, when he's on the field, he's gotten better every year. This year, he's being a monster. He's going to get a ton of money. And it looks like, things might not, continue between him and the Yankees. So like, I just wonder if the Mets are looking at that, like, whoa, we don't want that to happen here. But,
Yeah. Well, for the Mets specifically, I think that's just a problem with having such inconsistent front offices for the last 4 or 5 years. Since Alderson left, Alderson never really gave extensions before, anyway.
Right.
And then Brody came in, and then you kind of changed regimes again.
Yep.
And then last year you don't have anybody, but now Epler's in there. But then this year Epler had to deal with the lockout and really had to land people for this year.
Right.
And then you're like, where is the time to focus on an extension?
Right.
You'd like to think a front office can do, multiple things at once, but a lot of those multiple things are like, building an analytics department and doing all that. And like, maybe part of that isn't like really sitting down and trying to hash out an extension with Brandon Nimmo. And that's going to end up with him being a free agent.
Yep.
Because Brandon Nimmo's been pretty open about like, yeah, I'll do it, but they haven't really we haven't sat down and talked about anything yet.
Right.
So that's I think that's part of the issue is the fact that their front offices have been so in flux for the last 3-4 years.
Right.
And part of that time being like, you're kind of hamstrung by money, and now you're not, which is great. But at the same time too, it's like, now you end up like half your roster's going to be a free agent, and you might be spending most of this offseason trying to secure some of those guys, keep some of those guys, bring other people in. But then you're like, all right, well, where does an Alonso extension kind of sit in with that? I mean, it's kind of insane. Pete only has 2, because he started 2019 on the opening day roster. He only has 2 more years of team control after this.
Yeah.
He's getting that just like 6 and he's done. And one of those 6 was the shortened COVID year.
Yeah.
So this is going to technically be his 4th full major league season.
Right.
But he's played less than, at the end of this year, it might be just over 3 years worth of MLB games, which is great for him because he's, his body's going to be 100 less games taxed without getting injured, and all that stuff. So, but coming back to an extension, obviously you would like to try to get something like that done. I think the Yordan Alvarez deal was still a bit team friendly, but this was like his deal felt the most player and team friendly than like a lot of previous deals, or I'm thinking of Ronald Acuna, or I'm thinking of, I don't know, even Ozzie Albies.
Horrible deal.
That's that. Yeah. I hope he fires his representation like Freddie Freeman did. I don't know. But then you look at someone like Fernando Tatis, like, 10 years, 340 million, like pretty good.
Yeah.
With Pete, I think you're right in the fact that it'll cost more than someone like Yordan Alvarez. I think just purely from even like a state taxes standpoint, being in Texas than New York, but then also like Pete playing the field more often. Pete hasn't gotten hurt. He's been on the IL for 10 days, maybe one time. And I think that was last year when he had a little bit of a wrist issue. So yeah, there's some other things you factor into it as well. And I'm sure the analytics team that they have might be like, hey, this is how we project Pete going. And then you just have a whole back and forth there. But I think 6 120 or 6 117 or whatever Alvarez got is probably a starting point. And then you work your way up from there. But again, you might be able to get like 7 150 if you're buying out 2 years of team control, because instead of him making, what is it, 8 million next year and 13 million the year after that, he might be able to make, 10 million next year and 17 after that, and then a little bit more money for the next 4 or 5 years or whatever it is. But yeah, it would be nice with that. Like you look at someone like Jeff McNeil, dude, like that's the kind of guy that you're like, you give him, like, you guarantee him 5 years and $35 million and see if he says no,
True.
Because just like bats like that, like play pretty well over time,
Yeah, right,
and
right,
he's clearly proven this year that, like, 2021 was a blip.
right.
Um, so yeah, again, but all this just comes back to like stability, the front office, I think, and hopefully now that they have a pretty clear process in place, that they'll be able to focus on those sort of things moving forward.
Yeah, no, yeah, we'll see. It is nice, like you said, there's stability there in the front office. Hopefully that stays for a while, more than like a
Yeah.
season or something like that. But yeah, no, listen, Nepal's been a pleasant surprise there. I think everyone was like when it first happened, was like, ugh, bottom of the barrel. Spent a
Yeah.
lot of money on the Angels with nothing, but it kind of seems like now that might have been twofolded because he was working for an owner that is also not one of the
He
best.
was working
So
for the Jet. He's working for Jeff Wilpon of the West
yes, yes.
is what he was working for.
So, it's been better there, like you said, and it's just the fact that also like you said, the Mets have like half the roster they have to re-sign. We'll see what happens at the end of the year. But you win a World Series, it makes that stuff a lot easier. So hopefully they could do that. But I guess we can kind of put a bow on the show here. Just do a little deGrom Scherzer talk. Start with Scherzer. He had a second rehab start yesterday for the Rumble Ponies. They pitched in Hartford. He was in the tri-state for that. Pretty good. I think about 4 innings. He had 7 strikeouts, like 3 earned runs or something like that. Pitched to Francisco Alvarez. Had a couple quotes after the game talking about Alvarez, just saying like, it's weird for him because like there's no scouting reports, there's no nothing. He's like, I was just relying on Francisco, to kind of work with me through the hitters, and said, he's a young player, but it was nice to to throw to him, and thinks he'll have a successful future. Also said probably the most important of everything. He's never pitching for the Rumble Ponies again. He's healthy. Next start he makes is going to be for the Mets. So
Yeah.
we're glad to hear that. It's been we talked just kind of for a while here how the rest of the starting staff has kind of held things together as best they could without both of the guys at the top. But to get Scherzer back, hopefully, I guess that lines him up to start in Cincinnati. I think
It might be on the 4th of July. If he just
Ooh.
goes if he just goes on normal rest, it
Right,
would be the
right,
4th
right,
of
right,
July. But if he kind of, maybe wants one extra day. But
right,
the reason they pushed him from Tuesday to Wednesday this week was because they realized, oh, it's not really going to mess up like his major league starts, like how
right,
many he can
right,
squeeze in before the All-Star
right,
break. He should still be able to get 3 in. But
right.
I'm wondering if he starts because again of 17 games in 17 days. I'm wondering if he starts like Tuesday instead of Monday this upcoming week, if
Right,
that affects it
right.
at all. So I'm sitting here with the schedule on my phone, like
There we
trying
go.
to trying to like count them out. But yeah, either way, he should be back Monday or Tuesday. And then in even better news, well, maybe not better news because he's not starting in the majors yet, but it seems like deGrom's next step now is a rehab start.
Right. Yeah, no, he threw 27 pitches at the St. Lucie complex, yesterday, 2 days ago, faced live hitters. There hasn't been anything bad as far as news, as far as that goes. I know the Mets are very secretive with all this. They don't want to give
Yes.
anything away at all.
Yeah.
But there hasn't been any bad news today. So,
Yeah.
hopefully they can give us a
Yeah.
little more. And that means, so like, you said the next thing is him getting a rehab start. And I know that they said there was a quote out the other day saying they expect deGrom to come back several weeks before the August 2nd trade deadline.
Mhm.
Whatever that means, because you have an All-Star break and stuff. But, hopefully, this is a step in the right direction. A rehab start. I'm assuming it's going to be more than one rehab start.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
whenever they get him back, you just
He's starting spring training. That's what
right.
he's doing.
And I've been thinking about when deGrom does come back, right? When Scherzer comes back, it's probably going to be that first start. It might be like 80 pitches, whatever. They don't want him to go
Yeah.
crazy. But for the most part, if he's back, he's back. The man is throwing, he's pitching, and you're not going to take the ball away from him if he has anything to say about it. With deGrom, I just wonder, even when he's back, like, are the reins off? Is it going to be you're only going to get 4 or 5 innings of a deGrom start? Is he going to be on like a tight pitch count? And that's, obviously, you're looking into the crystal ball, but like, if that's the case, then like at the trade deadline, you need another starter and you need another good one and probably
Yeah.
need another reliever too, because if this guy, if you're only getting, 4 or 5 innings of deGrom every 5th day is better than,
Yeah.
I'm not knocking on Trevor Williams, not doing that. He's been serving very
Yeah.
good, but he's not Jacob deGrom. So,
Yeah.
you'd want that however you can get him. But like also, you don't want to get hand tied because you get the guy back, but it's on, certain restrictions. And like, it's not 2018 where like he's the whole season. People are only watching every 5th day to watch Jake. This team has World Series expectations. And I know from my, as my standpoint as a fan, like that's all I care about at this point.
Yeah.
I don't really care about like guys not getting in the All-Star game, getting voted into the All-Star game, MVPs, accolades. It's nice. It's fun. But it's nice and fun because you're used to the Mets being out of it by June, and that's all you got to look forward to is like one player who's doing good on a roster of really bad guys. This is a contender. It's World Series of bust here. So like I'm excited to get deGrom back whenever that happens. I'm just, I don't know, concerned or worried's the word, but if he's going to come back and be Jacob deGrom, like the training wheels are off, like we're ready to rock here the last 2 months of the year, like let's go win a World Series. But like if it's not, if it's hey, we got deGrom back but for 4 or 5 innings and we'll see what happens in September, we can ramp him up there. The Mets really are going to have to consider continuing to bolster the pitching, whether it's the staff, both the staff or the bullpen. It can't hurt, and especially like if that happens, if you want to make a deep run, you got to have some some insurance there for him, even when he is pitching. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And it'll be interesting with his rehab because if you remember last year, obviously when he had a 0.9 ERA, like 80 innings into the year, is if he did have these little nicks and bumps and all that kind of stuff, like he would go on the IL, he'd throw maybe 1 or 2 innings in the minors, and then they'll be like, oh, we'll just finish his rehab up here.
Right.
Because he was pitching so well.
Right.
I'm wondering if they're going to take that same sort of mindset, or if they are going to really try to treat it like spring training, where they're gonna throw him for 4 or 5 starts,
right,
and maybe go an inning extra, or like have a really strict plan of what they're gonna do. So then maybe he comes back at the end of July, and maybe the rehab takes that long.
Which, you know what? If that's the case, that's because when he's back up, like Scherzer, right? You're right. I want you up ready to rock. Be the horse. Be Jacob deGrom. Yeah. The Mets need you to be that. So like, if it's not anything less than 98%, like keep your rehab starts. Like they're in a position now, even with the Braves on their heels, that they can do that. Like you said, it's totally different scenario than it was from last year.
Yeah, and you're going to get a lot of he's like a trade deadline acquisition getting him back. You're going to get a lot of that chatter, but that doesn't take away from the fact that, again, you're right. Like they're still going to need to trade for pitching. So we'll see. I don't know. We'll see if the Palm Beach Cardinals are somewhere on the St. Lucie Mets schedule over the next couple weeks, and we'll see if he's
they may try and be out of town for that, unless their social media team wants a bump. Then we know that that they
they'll call end of July. End of July is what I is when they're playing. So maybe his last rehab start before he comes up.
Exactly. That would be nice. Nice tune up. Yeah, exactly. There we go.
A good tune up against the Palm Beach Cardinals.
The reinforcements are on the way. It's a little bleak at the moment, but that's baseball. Nobody wins every series. Nobody wins every game. Sometimes losing streaks happen, and good teams bounce back. And the Mets have done that for the better part of this year. And it's only been like 1 or 2 game losing streaks, whatever. But they're a good team. They'll right the ship. I'm sure today is much needed to get themselves kind of corrected and get the ship righted for the weekend. But expect everything to keep going as it was. And it's gonna be a fight all summer between them and the Braves. It should be a lot of fun. Albie's not being out for a while probably helps the Mets. It's one less bat that can kill them, but we'll see what happens here in the next few days. But appreciate everybody listening. We'll catch you up next week with everything that happens from the next couple of series. Hopefully we'll have a Scherzer Major League start to talk about in that, which would be really nice. But until then, keep posting and let's go Mets.